Good morning. Thank you for being here, everybody. I'm really excited about this panel and this conversation we're going to have because we have two people here who are just out there in the woods, in the communities, involved in making a big difference in people's lives in the goal to fight poverty. So I want to basically just get into who we have here. But the great thing about this, to my estimation, is because I got the chance to see these two charities. I got the chance to go on the ground and visit these institutions. And we, of course, have Scott Winship here, who is one of the great thinkers of our time in this area. So I'm excited about talking to people who actually are on the ground fighting poverty, person to person, with specific ideas and proven solutions. So typically what we have is policymakers speaking to people, telling them what they ought to do to make a positive change. We're going to reverse that role, and we're going to talk to poverty fighters. We're going to tell policymakers what policymakers need to do to actually make a big difference and improve people's lives and fight poverty. As I mentioned, I visited both of these institutions, Gatekeepers and Corner to Corner, and they're doing really impressive work. Gatekeepers works with individuals both inside and outside of prison to make sure that they're making good on their second chance. They're often the very first stop that returning citizens make on their way out of prison. And Corner to Corner is doing amazing work promoting entrepreneurship. I've seen it firsthand. It's really something that's exciting to watch and witness. One of the most impactful programs, the Academy, provides aspiring business owners with the skills necessary to plan, start, and grow their own companies. I'm excited to learn from these individuals that are fighting poverty person to person. They're improving people's lives directly. And with that, I'd like to make an introduction. We have right to my right here, Shana Berkeley. Shana Berkeley is the executive director of Corner to Corner. It's a Nashville nonprofit whose work is firmly grounded in educational and economic opportunity and equality. She's born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. She went on to receive her bachelor's degree from Vanderbilt University and her Juris Doctorate from Belmont University College of Law. She left the practice of law in 2019 to take on the role of director of the Academy, Corner to Corner's 10-week entrepreneurship program that helps neighbors turn their businesses and their dreams into money-making realities. Under her leadership, she scaled the program to one of the top programs for early start entrepreneurs in the nation. In 2022, she started her role as the executive director. Outside of Corner to Corner, Shana owns Fashion Chase. That's right, it's Fashion Chase.
Fashion Chase.
I'm going to ask you to tell me what that is exactly.
But
it's a fashion firm that helps corporatively creative women find and redefine their personal style. And then at the end here to the right, we have Bill Gertner. Bill Gertner is the founder and leader of Gatekeepers in Washington County. It is a program that helps ex-offenders transition back into the communities after serving time in prison. So how does Bill know what these people need? How does he know what people coming out of prison need? Well, he's been in their shoes. Bill served 8.5 years in prison for domestic abuse. Bill's redemption story centers around the prodigal son. While in prison, a Catholic deacon gave Bill a copy of Henry Nouwen's book, The Return of the Prodigal Son. And that is based on Rembrandt's painting, The Prodigal Son. You can probably picture that painting. Well, Bill says it became, quote, "It became my Bible and I still carry it around with me wherever I go. It was the foundation for my reentry program. I got out on September 23, 2013, and 6 days later, I went to St. Mary's in Hagerstown. I walked into the 9:30 Mass, and there was a life-size painting of the prodigal son. I cried, and I knew that this is where I belonged, and that is how Gatekeepers started in 2014. It is all based on the prodigal son. Bill's faith continues to serve as a foundation for his life and for his program. He attends Mass regularly and is now an oblate novice at the Benedictine community in St. Anselm's Abbey in Washington, D.C. And then in the middle here, we have Scott Winship. Scott's familiar to everybody here at AEI because he's here at AEI. He is a senior fellow and director of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility at the American Enterprise Institute, where he researches social mobility and the causes and effects of poverty. He also focuses on economic insecurity and inequality, among many other poverty issues. Before joining AEI, Dr. Winship served as the executive director of the JEC, the Joint Economic Committee. During his time at the JEC under Chairman Mike Lee, Dr. Winship created the Social Capital Project, which is a multi-year research project to investigate the evolving nature of social relationships, including families, communities, workplaces, and religious congregations. So join me in welcoming this panel here to join us today to share your insights. I want to go with the practitioners, with Shana and Bill first. And one of the questions I've always enjoyed every time I try to tour some of these institutions that are making a difference is, what's your secret sauce? What is so unique? And let's start with you, Shana, and then go to Bill. What's the secret sauce? What is the formula that you've discovered that is actually moving the alpha, making the difference?
Absolutely. First of all, we're really excited to be here and see your faces here. It means a lot to us here there in Nashville. So thanks for being here, friends. For Corner to Corner, which is a Nashville-based nonprofit, we really have, I would say, kind of two ideas that are our secret sauce. One is that everybody already has passions, talents, and drive. Like, we don't give them that. Mm-hmm. And when you see people as already having that, because you already have it, whatever it takes for you to have gotten where you are, then you're already on the road to being able to co-conspire with them and co-labor with them and know that you're not actually saving them. In fact, you're helping them and they're helping you. And that experience has been life-changing, especially when you come out of being a lawyer. And a lot of lawyers, you do things that sometimes make you feel like you are the savior. But in fact, when you listen and you learn, that really has been the change, because a lot of the practices that we've put into place have been because the people in our community have said, have you ever thought about doing a class in the daytime? Have you ever thought about doing this and that? And that has helped us exponentially in our neighborhood.
Is it sort of self-selecting? Do people sort of know of your program? They have an entrepreneurial idea. They have an idea they'd love to work for themselves and have a business, and then they come to you? Is that kind of how it...
Where we are today,
word of mouth?
Yeah, word of mouth. So 65% of our students enroll because of word of mouth. Okay. We do have a really robust marketing program, and so that definitely creates some validity and some familiarity, that know, like, and trust factor, which is important in all things. But yeah, people know about the work we're doing. They have a friend or a family member who graduated from our program, and they also want to turn their business dreams into a money-making reality. And how we deliver that program is it's community-led and it's community-located. So they don't come to our building in a random address that they have to take. It's places where they live, work, and play, places where they already have agency, or maybe their kids play football. And then the teachers or the facilitators are about 10 steps ahead of them, right? I always say it'll be so cool if Oprah was your teacher, but she does not know how to do a Facebook ad. So it would be unhelpful if you're trying to figure out how to start a business today. And so we really want to make sure that they do have people they can look to, but it's not too far where they can't relate to them. So those two things really have been the catalyst for our growth over the last 4 years.
Very interesting. Bill, what's your secret sauce? There are a lot of recidivism programs out there. Why is yours making such a big difference? We'll get into metrics in a minute, but what's your secret sauce?
Hold the metrics. So we are definitely, our secret sauce is the fact that we're run by ex-offenders. Almost everyone involved with our program, or we call them members, they are ex-offenders. So as I sat in the prison for 8.5 years at 3 different institutions, and I would sit in, went to prison at the age of 60, came out at the age of 70, but when I went in, having decided to live, I immersed myself into the culture, and having been a college basketball coach, having been a partner in 3 IT consulting businesses, and having studied theology, philosophy, I was never headed for prison. But all of a sudden, alcohol took a hold of me, and I became just a horrible drunk, and ended up in prison, as we said. And I have to tell this, and there's the reason we're all here today. My reason is that July 21st, 2005, I was standing in front of an interstate highway at 10 o'clock at night trying to get run over by trailer trucks because I had just done a horrible deed to my ex-wife. She's fine. And I couldn't live anymore. I was going to be homeless the next day. I had taken a beautiful marriage, and I had taken a beautiful career and just destroyed myself. And I couldn't live anymore. And so I was thrust into the Baltimore County Detention Center for 5 months, and I was sent into Roxbury, a correctional institution in Hagerstown, served there for 5 years. Now, on a normal Thursday morning right now, I would be in there. I'm there every Thursday doing the business of living class. And so that full cycle, and to sit here with the people who really care, you're here for a reason. And I tell everyone that I've talked with inside the prisons that you have no idea that the wonderful, beautiful people out here who care about your incarceration and they care about who you are. So fast back. So I sit there after year after year after year. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the more I sat in a prison library, or I sat in a prison workroom, or I would just listen to all these stories. And none of these men had a chance. And that's why I don't call it the Second Chance Act. I don't call it what we do a second chance. It's the first chance, because most of us never had a chance. For some reason, bad parenting, abuse, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, bad luck, bad health. That's what we deal with. So the longer I sat there and I re-immersed in my faith, and I stepped back into every inch of my life and said, I'll take a piece of that, I'll take a piece of that, I'll take a piece of that, and I can help these people. I know I can help them. So the secret sauce developed right there. And one of the guys, I was in one penitentiary, and Keith Royce is with me. He's my partner now. I convinced him to leave his position in Baltimore, and he moved to Hagerstown. Finally, when we got some money from that we could do this, one of my board members here, Diane, is here, and I appreciate her. She's here, Keith is here, and they're both here for the same reason, is that we all got together and realized that we could do something having ex-offenders run this program. The secret sauce starts and ends with that.
So one of the reasons we're all here is because our foundation, the American Idea Foundation, and EI and Notre Dame, are working together to try and, so the whole point is find secret sauce and then see if you can replicate it and scale it and move it all around the country. Yeah. And so, we want to just basically copy you and replicate you around the country. So I want to ask both of you, it's not necessarily the first thing you think of when you're trying to help people in their place of need to go through a bunch of randomized control trials and metrics and measurements to get data and evidence, but you're both doing that. You have both basically agreed and decided to sign up for the really time-consuming, labor-intensive path of measuring what you do so we can track what you do to see what works and what doesn't, to perfect it, and then to be able to replicate it and scale it. So why'd you do that, and how is that going? And just give us why are you subjecting yourself to all of this data and analytics and these economists and the measurement and the record keeping and the labor intensivity? How has your dream, what it started with, how is it working now that you're measuring it, and why did you choose to do it that way?
The fact of the matter is, randomized control studies, data, really understanding what you're doing is very important. And so when we partnered with Leo, we knew that it would be challenging, and we knew that there would be some things that we would have to change, like having a control group, actually having to learn what a control group was. But it's necessary because you want to see what works. You do 100% of all this work, you hire all this staff. What is the part of it that really makes a difference? How can you double down on that? And the things that are just lukewarm, okay, was a great idea 5 years ago, and it no longer works in the society or the community that you live in, how can you then pivot? So it's necessary for us to be able to have measurements, to know what works, to share the story, to replicate it really well, because it is our heart to say, let's go into other communities and not make them do the last 5 years, but they can really get the good stuff. And then for our community, for them to understand what it means, for us to be able to share the story, particularly with policymakers or academics or people who numbers matter more than the individual story, and say, hey, this is necessary. Let's open the floodgates. Because right now we are having to tell people no or not yet. But at some point, our heart is that everybody who inquires can get it. And that's only available when you have metrics that work.
So was it hard to get your organization to buy into this? Was it a little difficult to say,
That's a
okay,
good
we had to set up a
question.
control group, and there's some people we may have to say no to, and then
Yeah.
how hard was that to get set up in the first place?
Yeah, well, the person who heard about it was our co-founder. His name is Will, and he had to convince
Will's
me.
here.
Will's here. There's Will over there, and I am the old lawyer, right? I am a recovering lawyer, as we call it. So convincing me was always going to be the hard part.
I'm a recovering politician,
okay,
so I can
you
relate.
know.
Yeah.
So it's part of your brain that like kind of sits in the background, but when it's activated, it wakes up, and you have all these questions. And so by the time it got to our staff, I think I had really asked the hard questions. And I was, ready to walk away if I wasn't interested. So we went to a conference, and I was like the one in the back. And they're like, Shayna, yes, what's the question? But once we did that, I'd asked all the hard questions. So I did go to my staff, and we did have to talk about what feels good for us. Because relationship is really important. And our community, the Black community, has gone through a lot of things. There are a lot of famous studies that really has been detrimental to our community and our ethos across the nation. And so we had to have those conversations. We decided to be very forthright. Some people don't know they're in the study. Our staff, our participants know that they're in the study. If they are in the control group, we are still interacting with them on some level. So we can't offer the intervention. They can't take our class. But we still have a relationship with them. They're still obviously always invited to our public-facing experiences. And they have a not yet, so an 18-month non-intervention. After that, then they can choose.
So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not a never or figure out on your own. And we also have a lot, if you guys follow us, or if your social media people like me follow us at Corners to Corner, we do a lot of front-facing experiences and entrepreneurship education. So they don't get the full shebang, but it's not cold. And so we were really intentional about doing that. And so maintaining that relationship, we found, has been the most important part. And that has been really exciting for us because we knew it was important, but it almost is as important as the study. And people have, actually, we send out letters, and people have thanked us for the letters, and they didn't even get in the class.
Really?
I was like, okay, yeah, and so it just matters that they're seen, heard, and celebrated just as much as we are really able to speak to their business.
Great. So just Leo is Laboratory for Economic Opportunity
Yes.
at the University of Notre Dame. So we all are working along with the economists at Notre Dame on these randomized control trials.
Yes.
Bill,
Thank you.
what is the business of living? Just a quick, some of us are familiar with it, but I don't think people here are all familiar with it. And then give us your data point, which is why submit yourself to randomized control trials, to have people track all this data, and how difficult was it to do that, and how is it going so far?
I was taught by the nuns, and we have a local nun. She likes Notre Dame. I'm all in.
I still have a healthy fear of nuns myself.
Exactly.
Those were my teachers for all my grade school years.
So, Hagerstown is a prison-centric town. There are 3 state penitentiaries in Hagerstown, and there's one detention center. Our local detention center has 370 people. So when we were approached by Leo to join this study, it was like a force fit at first. We're the smallest group that they ever dealt with. And so we kept talking with them. But because it's a prison-centric county, and it impacts a 40,000 population town, a lot of stuff happens. Like Paul and I talked about this, and he came to town and through a big luncheon. We had 100 people there. We had the mayor. We had the whole village came out, because until ex-inmates took over the reentry program in that town, nothing happened. They pretended there were no prisons there. They didn't know, people did not know the difference between a prison and a detention center, a local county jail. That's where all the poverty comes from. And poverty caused by incarceration, as Paul and I have talked about, is the worst form of what? Violence. So we have a lot of problems there in Hagerstown.
But a perfect place to do this, right? Hagerstown.
Exactly.
3 prisons. It's where most Maryland sends prisoners, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, now they send them to the parole after they get out. If they live in Washington County, they send them to the parole office. And Keith and I just established thanks to the reentry people who run the state of Maryland. They do a great job right now. We have an office. Ex-offenders have an office in the parole office. So you report to your parole office when your officer, if you're coming back to Washington County, and if you come to the parole office, and if you have basic needs, you go down to the end of the hall to Gatekeepers for your basic needs. And our basic needs are Maslow's theory, Mother Teresa, and a prodigal son. That's our business model.
And the business of living model?
And the business
you have it in front of you.
And everyone, there's going to be one at the end of the room. So when you leave today, a little bit of elevator speech on Gatekeepers. And our business model is based on 4 components. Every day we wake up educationally, we get smarter occupationally, we get better at our job. Personally, we become a better person. And then the missing component in our reentry program, if you look at most reentry programs across the country, there's one word that you'll never see: spirituality. So there's a spiritual component to everything we do. And we found out, with or without Leo, if you don't have a spiritual component to your reentry program, you're going to have a tough time. So, and so when Leo, getting back to the original question, Leo talked with us, I felt that those 370 people who are locked up in Washington County jails, they're all our citizens. They don't come from the state detention centers or the state prisons. They are our local people, and they come immediately back into our village. And I asked Leo how you can help us do that. And they gave us this project, and even though we were so small, and Paul has helped us get to the next step. And we were all gung-ho going for it, and then COVID hit. We blame COVID for everything. So COVID did hit, and so we're just getting the things back on track, and doing a great job of getting that thing. 70% of the men and women who are locked up in our detention center go back. So we're there to try to do it locally, just like politics. Reentry starts locally. But at any rate, the Business of Living program is a fantastic way to have your own business. Most inmates, they sit around rec centers, and that's, again, I learned a lot. They want to have their own business. They want to work with their nephews. They want to work with their cousins. Why? Because they want their own business. They can't stand authority. That's one reason we all go to prison. We can't deal with authority. We didn't in junior high school. We didn't learn that. We got cut by authority, or there was no one at home at night, and your coach cut you, and you're puberty, 13 years old. What are you going to do? Who's at home? Well, that's all of a sudden that's your team. So we fight through that, and we know that very well. And our evidence tells us that if we can get someone right at the point. We did a video, Keith did a video of 48 hours, the first 48 hours out of prison. A lot of stuff happens there. So that's why we call it Gatekeepers. We try to meet as many people we can at the gate and bring, if they're coming back to our county. And I'm very proud to say that we're the only organization in the state of Maryland. We're in every penitentiary that I've ever served in. And Paul, this is just brand new, 2 weeks ago. We are operating within one of the penitentiaries I was locked up with. We started, along with the reentry people from the state of Maryland, we have a wing, a reentry wing. Right now, there are 18 men in there, and they're all getting out within a year. So these people are coming back to to Western Maryland. So we're trying to focus on taking care of our local people. And they're going to have a reentry program for 1 year. And ex-offenders leading it. So we're very proud about that. So we're inside the parole office now. We're inside 2 of the prisons. We have a work release area that we're helping run. And we're in Cumberland, Maryland Federal Penitentiary doing a business of living and seminars. And we're infiltrating inside the prisons. The only way it's going to end is going from the inside out, not from the outside in. I know policy people might not like to hear that, but you can't shoot the deer from the lodge. You got to work from the inside out.
As a deer hunter, I can relate to that statement. Right. So, but you signed up for a randomized control trial with a control group and all of this stuff, and
Right.
and the goal being hone it, prove it, scale it, repeat it. Right? That's
Simple and repetitive are the key words.
yeah. So Scott, let's get you in here. So we have two people on the ground who are the doers. You're a
non-doer.
thinker. Right. I wasn't going to. You're a think tank guy.
If you move to Tennessee, we can
So
change that.
what you just launched the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility, which is looking to do very important work over the next year. What I'm interested in is, as a thinker, as a think tank guy, as the leader and the founder of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility, how do you view the relationship between those looking to improve public policy and those who are on the ground providing direct services? So, in other words, how do the thinkers and the policymakers learn from the doers, and vice versa? How does that virtuous cycle get started?
Yeah, that's an incredibly important question. First, I just want to say I'm happy to be on stage here, humbled to be next to the doers. I was going to say that
We're beers.
I'm representing the non-doers, and I'm also concerned now that Shayna may be evaluating my fashion sensibilities. Also.
I did, and it's great. It's great. 2 thumbs up. The blue glasses, the pink tie. I see what you did.
Thank you. So kind. You look great as well.
Thank you.
All right, back to topic at hand. I think so. As sort of a think tanker, at our best, I think the folks who are in positions like mine, including policymakers in DC, we're coming up with ideas that can affect a lot of people. So the people in Nashville, people in Baltimore, in Hagerstown, and in a bunch of other places as well, and we can see a lot of patterns that may not be apparent on the ground. Put facts together and try to come up with solutions that are appropriate to the big problems of our time. At our worst, we're coming up with incredibly impractical ideas without having set foot, in some of the settings that you all work in every day. Proposing utopian schemes that are basically unworkable, and so it's really important, I think, that that folks in DC, the folks who are doing policy development and policy thinking, do have this reciprocity with folks who are every day getting up and helping real people in the real world. We need to be able to understand from the folks who are there on the ground the importance of things like social capital, which is just a word that really means the importance of relationships. Things like the fact that you have ex-offenders who are more effective at doing the things that you're doing because they've got this lived experience that you can't just sort of slot anybody into. The importance of spirituality in your program is not something that folks in DC are sort of inclined to think like, okay, we need a little stronger dosage of spirituality, and I'll write this into a new section of this bill that way. So these are incredibly important things for us to know about on the ground. What can we offer folks on the ground? I think at our best, it's things like what Leo is doing, where they have some expertise in being able to design program evaluations, both to show you all that what you're doing is working, things that aren't working as well, to be able to see that, to be able to translate what you're doing to other settings, so that we can scale these up and have a lot more people benefit from them. I think there's things we can do to help you use facts and data to build your case for donors, policymakers, to sort of see what other approaches that are happening around the country that are related to what you may be doing in Nashville, what you may be doing in Hagerstown, that are working, and so we can sort of serve that function of sharing information across places. And I think Leo is a great example of doing all those things.
So I want to go into a couple of discrete issues for each of the two of you doers. Sorry, Scott.
No offense.
Bill, criminal justice reform. So that's top of mind. I spent a lot of time on the issue myself in government. You're seeing a lot of loud voices these days, talking about rising crime and public safety. In your work with returning citizens, how do you think about the very real concern that individuals have around public safety, with also the ability to provide ex-offenders with real second chance at improving their lives? So this is an issue that's discussed so much in society. What's your experience with it, and how do you think you can improve the public's view on returning citizens, on second chances, on redemption, on just the effectiveness of reentry?
So what we feel is we have a program every Saturday morning in Hagerstown called Citizens Meeting Returning Citizens. We, the returning citizens, you guys, the citizens. And we started in my office 2 years ago with 8 people. Then COVID was on its way in or out, who knows. And so we started with 8. And now we have 70, 80 people every Saturday morning. People walk in off the streets to see what's going on. And it's our returning citizens, and it's the women from recovery houses, and we're all focusing on basic needs, business of living. And so our board comes up, and the judges come, and it's the whole village getting to know each side of the coin, getting to know the citizens, getting to know the returning citizens. So, and we have to know it, it's not in my backyard. That's the big thing with citizens. Then opioid hit. And so that backyard switch changed drastically because a lot of different people's children and cousins and nephews and everything ended up with an opioid problem. So it's hitting more and more the local, everyone. And it's taking no prisoners, so to speak. But the Citizens Meeting Returning Citizens has just opened up the eyes of the whole community. And to the point, our new mayor was one of the first people to have a desk inside Gatekeepers. She was locked up in the local jail. She was married. She had 5 different children under 4 different men who are locked up in prison. She's now our mayor. And she's part of the Gatekeepers program from day one. So we are, again, the knowledge that brings to the table, using ex-offenders, getting back to the secret sauce. We're an ex-offender, and we're proud of it. We don't hide anymore.
So that's interesting. So that's really, really intriguing. So by basically having these community events where you're just integrating the community from the get-go, it's sort of breaking down those barriers, opening minds, and it is giving more job opportunities. Is it giving people
exactly
just turning their hearts to understand that people have made mistakes and they need to be reintegrated in society, and they want to give them a shot? Is it that simple of just making the community come together?
It is that simple.
Yeah,
it really is. And why do we go from 8 to 70 people every Saturday morning in a small village? That's the only way you can judge it.
So
and ironically, one of that stories, a judge came and he didn't get it till the end of it, and all of a sudden he stood up and he said, "This is the only place where I can put that man in prison and come back 4 years later at Gatekeepers and have a cup of coffee with him."
Oh, really?
That was the proof. That was the secret sauce that day.
Wow. So I was driving in here, I was thinking, Shana, the economy, I want to ask you sort of a macroeconomic economic question in a micro way.
All right.
So, the economy, it appears to be heading, to either slow growth or a recession. Mm-hmm. You've had, pretty high inflation for a period of time. We just came out of COVID. So pretty tough economic knocks we've been getting. Now, Nashville is kind of a boom town, at least it's thought of that way.
Yes.
How has that been going for your clients? How is that, how has the entrepreneurship, been going in this kind of an economy? Hit with COVID, then hit with inflation, now hit with, everybody sort of tightening the belt thinking we're going to have a recession. what do you see on the ground in the economy? How is it easier to launch a business than it was 3-4 years ago? Is it harder?
It depends on the perspective, right? Because regarding the knowledge, tools, and networks to launch a business, Corner to Corner's job and what we've seen success in, we have 819 graduates. We help Black entrepreneurs start small businesses, underestimated entrepreneurs, and 88% of our graduates identify as Black women. Now, Goldman Sachs put out a study.
88% of your graduates are Black women.
Are Black women, okay. Yeah. And Goldman Sachs put out a study that said 13% of white men-owned businesses compared to 0.5% of Black women. 0.5, so not even a full percent. That is not a talent gap. That is an opportunity gap. And so we want to create on-ramps to opportunity. So Corner to Corner has done a great job to say there's always money, right? There's always people shopping. And Black people have a $1 trillion with a T buying power. So it's not for lack of funds. It's because there's no place to go that helps Black entrepreneurs, that supports Black entrepreneurs in different sectors. And so it's both and, right? There are still barriers to starting a business, particularly in Tennessee, that we want to address and policymakers can help us address. But the idea that I don't have to go to YouTube University and watch 50 videos to just piecemeal, where do I take this piece of paper to say I'm a business, right? For us to have an ebook that has the 11 first steps that you should do, that you can download on your phone, and it literally says, go in the door to the right, go to the third floor. And it gives you really a probable step. So the economy is obviously taking a turn, and we look at that from a micro level. We talk to our entrepreneurs about what that means for your bottom line and operation budgets. But there's still money to be made, and businesses are starting every single day and have found success.
So there's still opportunity. There's still liquidity.
Absolutely. There's opportunity, and there's opportunity to learn and grow, and even more opportunity now because of e-commerce. And so even if it's not in your town, there's still ways that you can do it, not only nationally, but internationally. And I do want to encourage people, if you're listening, right, and if you identify as the doer or the thinker, but in this day and age, where it's both and, that doers are the thinkers, and thinkers are the doers, because you need both people. You need somebody who can see it from a perspective of policy, but then can have programs like Leo, can give you academic help about research. But then the doers, you're on the ground. You're saying, how can I do this in a creative, innovative way, and then create and thought leadership. So I think it's both and.
So you kind of just answered the next question I was going to ask you, which is, what exactly is the program? It's basically here is how you build and run a business.
Yes, so it's a 10-week program. And each week we talk about, if you have a business, then you've probably heard of the lean model canvas, but basically it's different parts of a business. So your customer, your mission, your accounting principles, your legal structure, your break-even points, employment, all the things you need to start a small business. We teach that each week. It's written on a 5th grade reading level, so it's accessible to all of our neighbors. And then also it has case studies as well as practice areas. So we'll teach you what's a feature versus a benefit. We have a case study about, is this a feature or a benefit? And then we turn to your business and say, okay, tell me about the features and benefits. So no matter your learning style, right, no matter where you are in your life, even if you just have the idea, you're able to put it into practice, and then you have practitioners, you have leaders, other entrepreneurs who are there to help you then to grow that.
If I recall from our visit, you have a lot of mentors who have already gone through the program, launched their businesses, kind of been there, done that, know what they're doing, who are helping the newer people coming through the program. So
they come into our program who has an idea, but also we have people who've graduated, who've crossed the $1 million mark. One of our entrepreneurs, he's in his 2nd year of full-time entrepreneurship. He just crossed the $300,000 mark. Wow. So there's money in entrepreneurship, and it really has been shown to help close that wage gap that exists between Black Americans and white Americans.
Okay, so I want to ask one more round of questions, then I want to open up to see if anybody in the audience has one. But you just mentioned it as well, barriers.
Yes.
So let's go Shayna, Bill, and then Scott. If you have a magic wand and you could wave it, what barriers from government, state, local, federal, are in your way that you would like to get rid of? Or is there something government should be doing that it's not doing? Or more importantly, probably, is there something that's really standing in your way that is making it harder for you to scale?
I'll say it from a nonprofit standpoint and then from an entrepreneur standpoint,
Okay.
because it really matters how our entrepreneurs experience this. From a nonprofit standpoint, I think allowing nonprofits to be nimble and to pivot. A lot of grants really want you to do the same thing for 3 years. But if we can look back on the last 3 years, a lot has changed. And so the way that we deliver the model has to be able to change as well. And there are also some really stringent reporting methods that kind of tie your hands a little bit when you're trying to actually implement the
And
work.
when you don't mean, so there's nonprofit grants and government grants both have that sort of, those strictures that make it a little harder to
Yes.
exercise discretion and, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yes, exercise discretion and be able to say, you know, what does it mean to start that? It can be things like a reimbursement grant. Well, you have to have the money to get reimbursed, right? Or things that say you have to do it this way for 3 years, and if you want to change it, it has to get run up 50, layers. I'm sure policymakers are familiar with that. So as a nonprofit leader, those are things that we think about often when we're trying to figure out how to make money decisions. For entrepreneurs, I would say specifically, I can only speak to Tennessee, but there are still a lot of barriers to starting your business. You can say, I want to start a business, but you have to get 5 licenses, 4 permits, file your LLC on the state and the federal level. And so that's easy to trip up. And the fear of doing it wrong and having all this people come at you, and now you owe us $50,000 because you didn't do it right, can sometimes keep people stagnant. So we're doing the best we can to educate people, but really saying, what are these things that are necessary and what things were created back in the day for whatever reason that are no longer helpful in a digital e-commerce society.
Yeah.
I'm really looking at those closely would be helpful to us.
Is licensing one of the bigger headaches that
Licensing
you
and
think of?
permits to get the right ones, and then also having small business grants that you can give. We have a 1% interest loan at Corner to Corner that we started out of necessity. So we give our entrepreneurs, they apply for, they may need product, they may need to start a website, they may need certain consulting, $1,000 and 1% interest loan has changed the landscape. Think about $1,000. But for our entrepreneurs, every dollar already has a job. So if you don't have extra dollars, how are you really gonna get that influx? And we don't have the friends and family around that's necessary. And so we've been able to help that. But I think the government, nonprofits, state and federal government can get involved with that to really change the landscape of their society and their community.
Okay, Bill, what are the barriers in front of you? What would you like to get rid of?
Shane said one thing, one word, education. So I think education is lacking. The education in this room is lacking. If COVID, if incarceration and the evilness of being locked up, just think of our penal system. How much did each inmate cost taxpayers? $35,000 in the state of Maryland, $50,000 in the federal prisons. So we as taxpayers, we can't bury our head about incarceration anymore. I mean, in education, there's no education. 60% of the people who come into my office, and we get about 400 or 500 a year, they can't read. Our workbook.
You said 60%?
60% that come in our office cannot read at a reasonable
Proficient level.
Right, exactly. And so, and then when Keith published our book, we started a little higher and we got it down to the middle school level. And that's why it's so successful. Our book has turned into videos. We're in 800 men have taken it around the country out of tablets, our Business of Living book. So education is certainly the one. We have the state of Maryland has a great reentry focus right now. In the past 3 years, it's just blown it out of the waters. And we have Western Maryland as a leader, and we have a new Secretary of Prisons who has worked on these reentry programs, and so that's good. But the people, can you imagine if we attacked the prisons, and it's much worse than you would ever imagine. I'm not talking about being in prison, that's bad enough. But just if you look at underneath and get the policy people inside prisons working. We would love to have some policy people come up and use us as a laboratory. We're a human laboratory. Prisons, inside the prison, it's like a city. They have a library, they have churches, they have gymnasiums, they have health care, they have a school. It's there, it's real. We can't hide it. If we treated prisons, incarceration, half the way we treated COVID, we'd be so far ahead. But there's, I spoke to the Archbishop and the Catholic Charities in Baltimore. Baltimore has a lot of problems, like Hagerstown does. And so we feel that if you get inside the prisons, you'll start to heal the cities on the outside, because there's so much of that stuff that goes hand in hand inside the prisons and inside the cities. So we, as citizens, we got to jump on this. It's COVID. Look at the generations of people. The father's in, he gets out. The son goes in. It's each generation, a lot of families, prison is a rite of passage. So why don't we do something about that?
Well, you said the state government, Maryland, really started doing something 3 years ago. So you kind of put a timestamp on it. So
no, the reentry focus.
Yeah.
So
really, what is it that they did that really moved them in the right direction to dealing with this issue? Are there just a couple of things that they did that
they started working from the inside out?
Okay. So they just changed their emphasis.
Right. And they opened the doors to places like Kairos, like people like some of the faith-based organizations. You can't do it without a spiritual component. We know that. We know that.
They let you all in the prisons. They do.
And
At the office down the hall from the parole officer.
They're using human capital.
But those were state government decisions that were made.
They are, yeah.
Okay.
State and or local. So we got to jack it up. There aren't enough people working inside the prisons or the jail. It's just ridiculous. No one wants to work in there.
All right, Scott, let me ask you the big policy question. What is, in your estimation, one of the biggest barriers to social mobility, upward mobility in America? And what, from a government perspective, what policy can be done to do something about it?
Yeah, I'd just add a few things, I think, to what has already been said. Occupational licensing, I think, is a huge issue at the state and local level, including where occupations where ex-offenders are sort of, don't get a license. They're excluded from that. But also, just the number of jobs for which there are barriers to entering, really prevents a lot of entrepreneurship, I think. You could look at things like housing and land use regulations that prevent us from building more homes, which would lower the cost of housing, a huge factor in families' budgets. The federal level, you can think of our safety net programs, which include just a slew of bad incentives. They disincentivize work, marriage, investing in your own human capital, saving. There's lots of things we could do to reform those, and our tax policy that includes marriage penalties as well. And then, of course, in education, as you said, there are a lot of things that states and localities can do, and even the federal government can do, to increase school choice for parents, allow schools to be more flexible in how they teach kids, things like charter schools that are able to produce strong outcomes. So there's just a slew of things we could do to remove barriers. And I think there's some affirmative things that we need to look at too, and that the center will be focused on. Early childhood disparities are so big when kids enter kindergarten that by the time they get to you all, if we could sort of make inroads reducing some of those disparities, that's going to pay off down the road in ways that will certainly make your jobs easier as well.
Any questions from the audience? I think there's a mic over here. If anybody has any question.
Regarding education, would you
Tell
care
us
to
who you are
talk?
first. Yeah,
My name is
introduce
David
yourself.
Krukoff. I'm a local. I just wanted to ask about, one person said fifth grade, the other person said middle school. Would you care to talk about or comment on social promotion or the stigma of maybe being not sent back, and maybe that should not be such a stigma at earlier ages, and how can we have children at young ages not be socially promoted, in other words, how can we have children get beyond fifth grade level more readily?
Yeah, I think when we talk about education, we also have a kids program at Corner to Corner, and so the focus, in my opinion, shouldn't be on, is it okay if you get held back, or the social stigma to that, because there always is. It's the same way as if you get cut from a team or you don't get a job, right? That's part of life. But it shouldn't be. It should be that are we being creative and innovative with the education system that we have now? Are we looking at the school system and the work of the teachers and the professional that is saying, how can we come alongside you and underscore that? Because education is not just in the school day. It's a daily experience. It's from when you wake up to when you go to bed. So the after school programs, what are the parents doing? And so a lot of our entrepreneurs, they actually bring their kids to the class. Of course, they're not understanding what we're talking about, but they're seeing people are learning as adults. And so learning doesn't feel like a 7 to 3 o'clock experience. It's a daily experience, and learning has no negative stigma to it. So I don't know. I can't comment on being, kept back or held back. I think that has a lot. Then you talk about their age and where they go to school and what that looks like on their report card and if they can get into college. So I understand the stigma, but we want to move more upstream to say that how are we getting creative with the time that we have with our kids? How are we using things like YouTube and movie making and music making to speak to education? And then how is that becoming an experience? People who are proficient in reading, and I think Bill was talking about this, make $29,000 a year more than people who are not proficient in reading every year in their adult working life. And so that's creating chasms that reverberate through generations, that it really is necessary that we focus on in a loving and exciting and creative and curious way, and not like, this is what you have to do, because then it makes you not want to do it. We've all experienced that in some way, shape, or form, right? If it's working out or if it, we're drinking water, you don't want to do it just because you have to. But we really say that it's ways to do it that feel uplifting and fun.
Scott, what's your take on the question?
Yeah, so I guess I'd use it to put in a plug. My colleague Ian Rowe, who's started multiple charter school networks, has recently been emphasizing the importance of the success sequence and actually teaching kids the success sequence as part of their curriculum, which for those who don't know is, it's sort of presenting the facts about how much more likely you are to escape poverty in adulthood if you graduate from high school, if you delay your having kids until you're married, and if you work stably. So he is in a position in charter schools where he can have a message like this that pervades the education that the kids there provide, and I think it's producing some really important results. Not sure if it's been evaluated, but.
Mark Lerner. Congressman, talking about education, thank you for your support over the years of the Opportunity Scholarship Program here in the district. Bill, so I have a question for you. If I'm an employer and someone comes to me who's been in prison, that may scare me, hiring that individual. Or if I own a building and I'm a landlord and this person has been in prison, I don't know that I want them living in my building. How do you overcome obstacles like that?
We face that all the time. And again, we're a prison-centric area, so people are used to a lot of inmates around. So we have people getting jobs all the time. It's not a barrier in our village. It really isn't. And getting an apartment, not a problem. So we load people with our Business of Living program and say, you have a mentor, you have a coach, and fortunately, being a small village, we know a lot of people. So in there, that's not the normal place. So down here where you live and you own apartments.
Well, so do you provide validation for individuals? Is there a validator that he can go to say, I vouch for this guy. He's gone through our Business Living program. Here's who he is. Here's what he's doing. I'm his social worker. Or I'm his mentor. I'm this. Is that a way
we do it all the time. We have letters, and we'll go right with them. We'll go to the interview. We'll go to job interviews with people if it's critical. We have maybe three organizations that will hire. They won't even check backgrounds. They trust not just us, but the whole village so much. But we'll go right with them.
So a validator, basically.
Yeah, a validator would be
And that seems like an incredibly important role that local organizations can serve. Even you think about things about getting credit. Any time where there's a decision that some big faceless institution sort of needs to make about people who've had a lot of challenges in their lives, to the extent there's a local person or organization that can vouch for them, that feels like a really important role.
Did you have a question? Yeah. He's right behind you. There you go.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jan Bates. My question was about the LEO program. And I wondered if you could give me a specific example of something that you stopped doing or started doing as a result of the program.
So I know both of us are still in the middle of the study, and so you really aren't able to see the results fully until about 3 years. So even though the middle may seem early on, it's still been a while that you're doing this. But I will say one thing that how we changed. We used to be that you pay to hold your seat, and a lot of people, if you have discretionary income, you don't realize that you can miss out on things because you don't have the money to pay to hold your seat. Our program is $140. But they paid a seat deposit of $25. Well, our program starts before you get your tax income, right? And right after Christmas. That's a really tight time for lots of families. And so one thing that we decided to do once we started our study was to do a randomized enrollment. And you got in the class. We didn't look at your finances. We didn't look at anything. You got in the class. And then if you can afford to pay, you pay it then. If you say, hey, Shane, I need a couple weeks, you pay it when you get paid. And if you can't afford it, then we find sponsors to scholarship you. And so a lot of people are like, randomized control, it feels unfair. We have to think about a lot of times in life where if you don't have the money, you're not first in line, even if you have the desire. So that's one thing that we've changed, that we found has really opened the doors for people being able to say, I can self-identify and who I am is enough. I'm not measured by my financial snapshot in that moment.
I'll try. I was going to close on basically that. So
You're smart.
Did you want to answer?
No, that's really good.
So I serve on the board of LEO. I teach economics at Notre Dame as well, and I serve on the board of LEO. And our foundation, the American Idea Foundation, helps seed finance programs so that LEO can do what it does with those programs. And what it does is LEO has an endowment to do 75 randomized controlled trials each year on what we think are promising poverty programs across the country. And what our foundation wants is working to do, along with policymakers at AEI, is build a data warehouse, essentially, a mechanism so that people around the country can go to one data clearinghouse and see where have all these successes been made in this particular area, so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel and go through years of error and trial and error, but take something that has now been proven to work that can be scaled and replicated. Mm-hmm. So what LEO is attempting to do is use the field of economics, and it's tough. I mean, you have to ask charities and poverty institutions on the ground that are local, ground up groups that have been sort of organically formed to submit themselves to these egghead economists at Notre Dame, who spend, a tenure at AEI to try and get the big policymaker up in the ivory tower and the think tank along with the poverty fighter on the ground. How do you make it all work together so that it can be scaled and replicated and repeated? Mm-hmm. And the theory in all of this, which is why we all do this, is we really think we can really bend the curve on poverty. We've had a war on poverty since the 1960s. We've spent trillions of dollars on this. And of all the things that just the federal government does, we really haven't been measuring evidence or effectiveness, what works, what doesn't work. So the whole world of poverty fighting from a policy making standpoint is trying to go toward an evidence-based system, so that we can track and measure what works, so we can repeat the successes and stop repeating the failures. And so that's basically what all of this is about. But it really comes from the person who is on the ground, solving a problem, seeing a need, and then building something. And then the policymakers get informed with that, and then the economists come to try and see if it can be scaled and replicated. And so that's basically what it's all about. Yes.
Happily.
So LEO now has been around for a while. So LEO has successes and failures. So there have been randomized controlled trials that just have proven that it actually doesn't work, or the results just aren't right where they need to be. So that means don't do it this way. But then there are randomized controlled trials. I think Padua program in Fort Worth, Texas, which is a navigator that helps people, put their plan to getting out of poverty, and they have a person that is attached to them that helps them design a plan, coordinate their benefits, and holds them accountable toward, meeting their plan to get themselves out of poverty, a navigator, so to speak. And that provides what we call wraparound services. So there are programs that have been done, this is a Catholic Charities one I'm thinking of, that has really sort of perfected this model, has done really well, and has gone through the randomized controlled trial and showed alarmingly positive results. So there's something like, let's take this Catholic Charities program down in Fort Worth. They went through this randomized controlled trial and they perfected it. Let's repeat that at all the Catholic charities around America. So that's the kind of blossoming that we're trying to repeat here. So that's basically what they're doing at Notre Dame. And then the policymakers like Scott Winship here at AEI look at all of this, and then I don't want to put words in your mouth. Look at all of this and said, well, here's how we can make sure that government isn't a part of the problem, but a part of the solution. Here's how government can actually help make more of these successes. And a lot of times, it's just breaking down the barriers in government, which are so regulated and so stultified and so done the old way that doesn't allow this freedom, this discretion, this innovation to occur. So that's what all of this is about. So sure, go ahead. I was going to wrap it up. Go ahead, sir. I'll give you one last thing, because we're over our hour limit.
My name is Gerald Chandler, and this is a question for Bill, and it's about reading. While you were in prison, the people that you were, the convicts who were in prison, the offenders, did you notice that they couldn't read? And was there any program that, like yours, that you run now that came in from the outside to help them read?
Yes, there is. One of the most successful programs that I've found is the Malta Group, and they do a lot of work pre-COVID with inmates. But we learned that there are the GED programs. Each prison has an educational school, and obviously reading is the biggest concern. But a lot of offenders would be working with the younger guys that can't read in the detention centers. I mean, it was amazing to see that, where older inmates helping the younger inmates in the rec room learn how to read. So it's there, just like anything is there. We just need more people working with inside.
Well, we could keep going on. So, but we've hit our time limit. I want to Shana and Will, you came all the way from Nashville. Thank you very much. It's probably nicer and warmer there, but join me in welcoming and thanking everybody. Bill, Scott, and Shana, thank you so much. Appreciate it.